Hi, everybody, and welcome to the OutMarket.Pro podcast. I'm your host, Mark Stein. At your small business, attracting and retaining talent likely plays a key role. To help you find new solutions for attracting and retaining top talent at your small business, I'm here today with Steve Kim, the founder and principal consultant of Talentscope. Talentscope is an outsourced hiring, HR solutions, and organizational coaching firm that enables owners of small to mid-sized companies to attract and retain the best talent so that they can achieve more of their potential. So welcome to the OutMarket.Pro podcast, Steve. Glad to have you.
Great. Glad to be here. Thank you, Mark.
So let's start with the problem you're solving for businesses. Outline what the problem is, what are the challenges that small businesses have around talent and hiring and the other things that you do. So what problem do you solve?
Well, at a high level, they're not getting enough qualified candidates to interview. So they're less likely to make a good hiring decision. And actually I can go through the 5 critical hiring mistakes that speak to that problem, but ultimately it comes down to several factors that maybe I'll just jump right into it.
Sure. Yeah. What are those mistakes?
Yeah. Let me see if I can do a screen share.
Okay.
So this is a slide that I've gone over numerous times. And of course, there's more than just these 5, but these are 5 that I like to talk about. And the first is hiring quickly and firing slowly versus hiring slowly and firing quickly. So a lot of times business owners, they have an urgent need and they try to fill that need as quickly as they can. Let's say their QC inspector or their office manager or accounts payable clerk has left, quit, resigned, and now they've got an urgent gap in their workflow and they're trying to fill it as quickly as they can. And then when they do find that person, and if that person isn't necessarily the best fit or working out, they'll tend to keep that person a lot longer than they should because of the hassle that they perceive in terms of finding, attracting, sourcing, interviewing, and bringing a new person on board. And so in the recruiting talent acquisition world, we have a saying that, hire slowly, fire quickly. Once you start seeing the red flags, you should act on it sooner than later. And a lot of times when I'm working with my clients, once we've developed a certain criteria for what determines success for a particular position, they're able to be a lot more decisive in terms of letting that person go, or we like to call it weeding out the misfits. Firing seems to be such a pejorative, have a harsh word, and they kind of move away from that. But if you frame it in terms of weeding out misfits, that means the person's just not aligned for whatever reason. Maybe it's a misalignment of their strengths for what the position requires. Maybe it's a misalignment of the culture, and we'll kind of go through that on some of the other points. But the second thing, of course, which produces the firing slowly, is the lack of clarity when it comes to expected performance outcomes for the position. So one of the first questions that we'll ask a business owner is, well, what is desired outcome? What problem are you trying to solve by hiring this person? Don't tell me you need an office manager, because that's not going to be useful. It's too broad. I can't really post for office manager. Tell me in terms of your workflow and what the needs of the business, based on the needs of the business, what problem are you trying to solve? What are the top 2 or 3 things? If you found this right fit person, what would change? What would stay the same? And so I consult with the client and help them think a little bit more strategically about the particular position. And then that kind of goes to the next point of hiring to fill a position versus optimizing the next hire based on company needs. So in some cases, they're thinking, okay, we need a controller. And then once we actually go through the gaps in their workflow and their processes, we realize that controller is the wrong title for what they're looking for. First of all, a controller is 140 to 180 grand a year based on the pay ecosystem of the company. I'm talking about one in particular, a 40 employee company that provides ATM machines and payment processing. Their highest paid person in their company is only making 100. So how are we going to bring somebody in that's going to make 180? It's probably not going to be the fit. And they don't need a controller. Controllers are higher level, more strategic accounting roles that typically larger companies would have, not a small company with 40 employees. And that's really our sweet spot is companies with 20 to 80 employees. We don't typically work with 300, 400, 500 employee companies where they already have a pretty well-developed HR hiring department in place. We provide an outsourced hiring HR service for small to mid-sized companies that may not have somebody full-time. So in this particular case, we realized that, when we actually went through the tasks and duties that the owner really felt like he needed to fill, it was really more of a financial analyst, data analyst, payments and billing. He needed somebody to analyze all this data to make sure that he's getting all the money he should be getting, because there's thousands of transactions and ATM transactions, and they're different billing based on the different customers that he has, and it's a lot of data. So he needs somebody to make sure that we're getting paid the right amounts according to the agreements we have with our customers. He needs to make sure that we're also paying out the right amounts, commissions and vendor payments. So that data has to be analyzed. And he's already got 2 people in his accounting department. He doesn't need another accounting person. And so as a result, we're able to reposition his job title. And now we've got more candidates applying that are a better fit for what he's looking for. So it just gives you a practical real life example of looking at it in terms of optimizing the next hire based on company needs, rather than just throwing a job title because someone with that job title left the company. And then not enough consideration for how a candidate will fit with the company culture. I know company culture gets, that word gets tossed around a lot. And what is culture? Well, it's really hard to define exactly in words. It's a vibe and energy. It's kind of the values. The culture really starts with the owner, the leadership team. It really starts, and then it spreads out throughout the company. But each company has a certain way of doing business. They have a particular style. And as we get to know the client, and usually it'll take us a year after we've hired a bunch of people for them and see who sticks around to get a feel for what right fit looks like in the context of the company culture. But that's certainly a huge slice of the consideration pie. Every year that goes by after doing this type of work, I'm realizing that culture fit is increasingly important in terms of their values, the work ethic, just the overall energy and vibe of the person. And then the last thing, and certainly not least, is the lack of standardized interviewing process, winging it. So what we found is a lot of owners or folks doing the hiring, they'll just have a conversation with the candidate and they'll just kind of wing it and just shoot from the hip, versus having a standardized list of 5 to 7 questions that they're going to ask across all the candidates. And it's important to do that because they found that predicting success. Daniel Kahneman, who wrote a book, Thinking Slow, Thinking Fast, did an experiment where he found that these officer candidates that were going to go into the officer training program, they had one set of interviewing styles where they would just they asked random questions. And then the predictability of who would actually succeed, it was very random. They could not have any reliable predictability of who would actually succeed based on just the random interviewing type of a question format, versus the other set of candidates where they actually had a structured interview and they asked the same questions across all the candidates, and then they would rate the candidates based on those answers. And that was a much better predictor of who would actually succeed in officer candidate training school. So that's important, and will of course help the client develop their own set of interview questions. And then we have a rating scale of 1 through 9, and we got to make sure that each number we have a shared understanding what that means. 9 means XYZ, 8 means this, 7, so that the hiring managers have a standardized way of rating each of the candidates. So that's just a handful of hiring mistakes. I'm sure there's a bunch more, and certainly, when we work with our clients, we go through each of these areas, and through a sequence of structured questions, we're able to help them clarify their own needs and their thinking about these roles. And that's really what a good consultant does, is provide a reasonable framework of questions that are in a logical progression that meets clients where they're at, and help them clarify and verbalize, and help them also document their needs.
Very good. And there's one point I'd like to talk a little more about, and that's company culture. Would you agree that now, compared to even 5 years ago, pre-COVID, but especially compared to 10 years ago, that there's more variety of company cultures than there used to be? I think there was more standardization, and every company's unique and has its own personality, but I think there's a broader spectrum of cultures now than there was in the past, where business was done in a more traditional way, and there are a lot of hybrid variations on how people run their businesses today. What do you think?
Yeah, I think if you look at it globally, we're becoming a more integrated global society. So you've got East Indian folks and people from overseas in China. There's just greater diversity within the workplace. I think if you look at the composition of larger companies, you're going to see that more diverse representation from people around the world. It could be different ethnic backgrounds, religious, social, and creating this sense of cohesion. There's a saying, unity in diversity is of course a challenge, and the companies that do that better will succeed, I think, in the global marketplace. As far as small to mid-sized companies, I'm sure they also feel some of that impact as well, especially with more remote type of work arrangements. I have a client that's a landscape design firm, and they've used a handful of folks overseas, Philippines, Vietnam, to do some back office accounting support functions. And that had never been the case pre-COVID. And I don't know if COVID necessarily kind of accelerated that adoption, because people are working remotely, and as well, as long as people are remotely, then it doesn't matter if they're in Texas or in the Philippines. So maybe there's a greater openness. I know I've used remote talent. My IT guy is from the Philippines. He's a Google certified IT specialist, actually worked for Google, and now he kind of does his own thing, and he helps me if I have any IT issues, email deliverability. I mean, he's my go-to, and we just schedule times that sort of lines up with his time zone as best we can. And so, yeah, I think in answer to your question, there is greater diversity because the world is getting smaller in a sense. and companies that can integrate these various uh, different cultures, what have you. I think we'll be able to make better use of the talent that's out there.
Good. So, talk a little bit about your background and what led you to the point that you felt the need to start this company. Just that way you can share background and sort of the incentive for this company.
Yeah, well, to make a long story short, I had my stint in corporate America, I suppose, and then I got laid off, so I figured I had to do something, and so I started this company with the idea that, working with small business. I grew up in a small business. My father owned a machine shop. He owned a market, and my mother owned a wig shop. So growing up, I've always been raised in a small business environment. So that's kind of what I gravitated towards, and helping small business owners do better, and in whatever ways that I can help them. Was kind of a natural area for me to focus on. And so, yeah, it's just out of necessity. I mean, I recall in the beginning stages, I would provide some type of consulting service, which essentially means whatever I can help them with, that maybe there's a gap in something that they weren't addressing themselves. And one day, one of my clients says, "Oh, our office manager Sally, she's left, and we're in a real pinch. Is that something you can help us with?" And then a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, we both graduated university at the same university. He was a recruiter, and I said, "Hey, Cliff, is this something that you could maybe help with?" And he goes, "Yeah." He did a lot of recruiting for the mortgage industry, so we put together the job posting and kind of went through the process, and we ended up finding some good candidates that, one of which that ended up getting hired. And so that was sort of the first start. Sometimes necessity, kind of dictates where you go. And then I learned that, this could be a service that we could provide for small business owners that, perhaps they're too busy to do it themselves, or maybe they've got somebody that is saddled with that task along with a dozen other things, and they don't really have the time or the expertise to manage this process. So yeah, I think businesses come out of needs. There's a gap, there's a need, there's a problem, there's an itch, whatever you may call it, and they need it solved. And so if they've got somebody that can solve that problem faster, better, more cost effectively than they can on their own, then I think you've got the makings of a business.
Yep. So do you mostly consult and work with a company to do the hiring, and maybe you advise, maybe sit in with other people? Do you mostly do it as an outsourced service where you and your team will interview candidates and submit an ideal or maybe a couple of winnowed out candidates? What's the ratio there?
Yeah, so we do the heavy lifting on the front end of that process. So we'll help define what the requirements, the must-have versus the nice-to-have traits and competencies. We'll figure out the right job title to post, because sometimes the internal job title may not be the same as the external job posting job title. They could be two different things. The job posting is really a marketing piece to get as many qualified eyeballs to apply to your ad compared to other similar ads that are out there. So we'll manage that job posting on Indeed. Typically, we'll use Indeed, ZipRecruiter, maybe even LinkedIn. And as we start to receive resumes, we'll screen those resumes. Our recruiters will screen through them. We'll do the pre-interviews over the phone or even a video interview. and we'll curate a short list of qualified candidates for them to interview. And so we'll coordinate the either a Zoom interview, a phone, or an in-person. So we manage that whole process, and it's quite tedious. Somebody has to stay on top of those postings, multiple times, throughout the day, evenings, weekends. If you don't reject those resumes within a certain period of time, you can get charged for it. And Indeed has different pricing models that they have that change from time to time. Now I think they're going to go back to a daily budget. So somebody has to manage that process and stay on top of it. And also, we're the first point of contact for that company. So we have to be able to kind of sell the employment value proposition of that client, especially if it's a hard to fill position and there's other companies competing for their talent. We have to put our best foot forward and tell them why they should work or consider our client versus somebody else that they might go to. And so yeah, we'll consult with the client as far as various aspects of the process, the talent acquisition process, but we'll actually do the work. We're not simply just advising them, but we're actually working on the hiring process, and as an extension of their team, we kind of serve that role as their fractional kind of chief talent officer type of function, in a way that helps professionalize their hiring process so that they're able to make a better impression to potential candidates.
For quite a while now, there seems to have been some automation in reviewing resumes, especially in big companies. And my sense, I have not been in the job market for a long time, but my sense is that there are very few resumes that have actually been read, especially for big companies. And now with AI, I suspect that it's going to get worse. Can you talk a little bit about pre-AI and pre-COVID reviews of resumes? It sounds like your team does more actual review of the resumes than companies might, especially big companies that have some automation. But talk about before versus now, and let's go ahead and project into the future. Do you think that AI will take over a good bit of the analysis of resumes for positions?
Yeah, I think so. It'll play a bigger role, not a smaller role, just in terms of its ability to screen through the resumes and pick out keywords. Now, I can only speak for my company and what we do. We haven't used AI as of yet to analyze resumes and keywords. I'm sure companies have done this even pre-AI, or I don't want to say pre-AI because AI has been around for a long time, but now it's really becoming a lot more useful and accessible. But they do have ways of combing through resumes and then selecting keywords that are relevant to a particular position, especially those higher level positions, project engineers, design engineers that have a specific skill set that they're looking for. Now, my team of recruiters, we don't use AI to scan through resumes. We do that with our own eyes. And yeah, maybe there's a way that we can basically download all the resumes and have AI analyze them and say, okay, give me the top three. Now, of course, we have to give them the search criteria. What are the keywords that we're looking for? So we haven't utilized AI for that purpose, but I'm sure in the future there probably will be some tool that we can leverage. When we go through resumes, it's just a quick scan. We're looking for reasons to disqualify the resume. So, for example, if they're out of state, and we know the client is looking for an in-person role, it's an automatic disqualification,
Even though they might be willing to relocate, it's not worth approaching that.
Yeah, unless it's like a super hard to fill position, like a roadway engineer, and he's absolutely perfect. And it's a more highly paid position, 100,000 plus, and the client is willing to consider a relocation fee. It's pretty rare. Most of my clients, they're looking for, positions that pay anywhere from 25 to, $40 an hour. So they're manufacturing, transportation, business services, construction, specialty contracts. So they're not in that market of relocating folks. It's pretty rare. It's just too much of a risk. If they go through the trouble of relocating that person and then they don't work out, now they're stuck, and they just don't want to deal with that. And also H-1 visas and sponsoring people, smaller companies typically just don't have the infrastructure and the resources to do that. But, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how AI will be utilized. It doesn't take us very long to scan through the resumes. I mean, we spend maybe a minute or less on each resume. I mean, it's just a quick scan. And then as we scan through them, we'll curate the top candidates so that we'll take another look. So at every stage of the process, all we're trying to determine, and this is what I advise my clients, is don't try to make a big decision like, oh, am I going to hire this person? Is this person right? All you can determine is, based on what I see so far, would I like to take the next step? It's kind of like dating. You're not going to go for coffee and say, well, let's
get married.
The person. Well, it's like, okay, that was nice. I think I'd like to have a second meeting date, a second coffee. So at every step, that makes the process a lot more manageable, because sometimes it can get a little overwhelming. You're trying to process this information and try to make this big decision when you don't really have enough of a sample size, a data set to make an informed decision. So, first step, look at the resume. Is there anything that is going to disqualify this person? Sometimes it's easy. They don't even look like the right candidates for the job, and they may have misapplied. Why is this person applying for this role? There's nothing in their background that's even close to what this job is requiring. Okay, it's an easy no. And then we'll look at it and say, okay, it looks like they have some relevant experience background. There's things that we look for. Job hopping, if there's multiple, gaps in their employment, and there's 3 months here, 6 months here, that also is kind of a red flag. How the information is organized. We have an intuition about the candidates in terms of how they organize information. Are they using bullet points with verbs and action verbs and concise, succinct descriptions, or are they giving me long paragraphs of narratives? There's formatting issues that we also look for, because there's so many resources on the internet. I mean, you can literally Google, give me an example of a good quality control inspector resume, or accounts payable clerk. Just show me a good example, and then boom, it spits it out. I mean, you could even use AI and then take the bullet points, craft it, and tweak it to represent your experience and background. So those things just let us know, is this person resourceful? There's so many resources out there. It's inexcusable not to have at least a well formatted resume with no spelling and punctuation errors. I mean, we're not that anal as far as a missed comma here and there, and also depending on the role too. If it's a machinist, I'm really not looking at the pristine formatting of the resume. We're looking at where they worked. Did they work for a similar type of company as my client? Did they work there for a good length of time? What was their job position, their title.
Mhm.
So
You know, I've been playing around with AI a good bit, especially custom GPTs that have just been enabled in the last month. By the way, we're for the audience, we're in December of 2023 as we record this, and I could see how a good AI tool could dig underneath the language, especially for subtle things like culture fit, by the way that the person words certain phrases. But then again, like you alluded to, I bet you, and I bet now even that people are having AI write their resumes and say, "Okay, here's here's my background. Here's my standard resume. I'm applying to a company that seems to value whatever. Will you rewrite this resume with that slant?" So it's going to be a different kind of cat and mouse game, I suspect, where we're looking for cues, and people who are applying are providing those cues that they think will make them more palatable.
yeah, that's a good point. And, people will try to game the system to figure out what they're looking for and then give them what they're looking for. It's kind of like a student taking a test. Well, I just want to pass the test. I want to get an A on the test, versus rather than are they actually learning the material? So yeah, you might have instances where if the candidate understands and knows what the criteria that the company is using, then they can adapt their resume to that criteria if it's well known. A lot of times, knowing what the criteria is not easy because the clients themselves don't have a well-defined criteria. But yeah, if there is a criteria that's understood or they can ask for, they may be able to get to the front of the line based on the resume. However, it's still just one small slice of the decision making pie, and that's where you have to actually talk to the person. Talent. I don't like to say we're necessarily talent matchmakers, but in a sense, there is some of that, kind of vetting process. And it's kind of like if you had a daughter or son, you're trying to find a suitable partner for that person. How much will you use the resume? I mean, that's just a part of it, but you actually have to see the person, talk to the person. And a lot of times you just don't know until you know. I mean, until they're actually on the job and performing the duties, you just don't know. And I tell my clients, I said, look, you just don't know until you know. And they laugh and they chuckle because intuitively they understand that, yeah, based on this conference room back and forth conversation and the resume, I have a limited data set to work off of. But there's a lot of things that I can't test for until they actually get on the job and they work with others. Are they working well with others? Are they what's their work ethic, their level of dependability, responsibility, communication? And yeah, you can infer some of those things based on their track record that's stated in their resume. So yeah, I mean, the first 30 days, 60 days is still a continuation of that initial interview. And if they have a working interview, which we found is super helpful for certain types of roles, I said, look, if you're looking for, let's say, an accounting person that has familiar with QuickBooks, well, give them a task that involves QuickBooks. Ask some questions around that. See what questions they ask. How do they respond? If you're looking for a working foreman for your landscape design or construction, take them out in the field for half a day. Let them go out with one of the field supervisors, see how they respond. And that gives them a better sample size of what they're in for as well. It gives them a better sense of the job. So through this accumulation of experience and data, you can make a more informed decision. And so I think it's just one slice of the pie. I know sometimes clients will ask me, well, is there some type of a personality assessment or some type of cognitive ability test, and I said, well, there are, but I don't think they're that useful. I mean, there may be one slice of the decision making pie, but I don't think it should be a big part of it.
Like
It's really,
standardized tests for college admissions. Similar.
exactly. Is that, I mean, I think it's one aspect of trying to determine, who's more likely to succeed. But how can you really test the heart of a person, their motives, their intentions, their work ethic, their determination, their humility, their adaptability, willingness to learn, and to be open, to take constructive feedback. I mean, all of these things. I don't know the standardized test that can measure these things reliably. So, you know, yeah, that's my rant when it comes to being too overly reliant on tests. You know, so
So let me get your impression on some of the changes in the workforce that you have seen. You know, I'm sure that we're going to have a lot of measurements on how things were pre-COVID compared to post-COVID. And there's some that are just obvious. People's desire to work from home, have flexibility, but in terms of in office versus out of the office. But I'd like to get your insights in some of the more subtle ways that you are picking up that people have changed pre-COVID versus post-COVID in how they approach work. And maybe we'll do the same thing for the corporate side. But let's talk about employees and prospective employees and the change that you've seen pre versus post-COVID.
Yeah, sure. And I can just give you anecdotally my experience and what I've seen based on the type of clients that we work with. I can't really speak to the larger companies. Certainly, the ship has sailed as far as 100% in the office type of work expectation. I mean, unless you're a machinist or you're a truck driver, there's certain things that you have to go into the office. But as far as other types of knowledge work, you know, this idea of just going into the office every single day is completely behind us. I mean, there is some type of hybrid. Now I know that the pendulum is now swinging back the other way, where people are coming back into the office, and some people enjoy coming back in the office. They feel like the isolation, working from home, the boundaries get very blurred, and it seemed for some they were constantly working. They'll put a load in the laundry, but at 10 o'clock they're still working. They enjoyed the greater flexibility, but it seemed like they're just constantly working all the time because their home is their work is in their home. And so we have to kind of devise certain strategies. Okay, make sure you take a midday break and go for a walk. Make sure you compartmentalize some part of your house as your workspace, and this time block as your work time, so that you can have a better work-life balance. We in certain instances, like this landscape design firm, the communication actually improved because, and this was kind of funny, and I'm just giving you anecdotal just observations. Architects are typically kind of introverted. They're more data analytic and creative, and so they wouldn't want to disturb the person, even though they're working under the same roof. And so with people working at home, they developed a kind of like a Slack, a group text messaging system, and so the communication actually increased. Now they're not having to walk over to the person's desk, but they've got this group text messaging system that allows them to have more frequent communication than less. whether or not communication has improved in general, who knows? But that was just one thing that came out of this working from home type of environment. Communication actually improved. They said that their productivity and their work output has actually increased as a result of working from home. There's less commute time, so you're not having to deal with that. So, but yeah, I think definitely some type of hybrid work arrangement is going to be the new norm. You know, working from home and at the office, because there's definitely some value having people collaborate in the same space, in this under one roof. There's a certain relationship building element that I think is present in an in-person that you can't get just over Zoom or phone calls.
Also, the counterweight to that would be there's probably less conflict in terms of interpersonal people rubbing each other the wrong way, because there's less opportunity to do that. Also, yeah, in terms of productivity, and it's been a long time since I've worked in a workplace, but I had zero tolerance for somebody just coming over just to chit chat. And I just don't like that kind of interaction. So there's probably some reduction in conflict because there's not this closeness of interaction. I don't know. Have you?
Yeah, no, I agree. There's a lot less water cooler talk, a lot less chit chat and social type of conversations. You know, of course, having some of that social conversation is also can be a rapport building, relationship, team building type of a thing as well. So, but yeah, I mean, from my observations, you know, especially with knowledge workers, you know, where their work is not dependent on operating machine, it's you know, from my observations and what I've heard, it appears that there's more work output. There's more productivity, not less. Now, whether or not there's better work-life balance, that's another question. It seems like the lines get a little blurry, and so maybe there's even less work-life balance than before.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly finding the right balance of working from home versus in the office, that's each company will have to find its own sweet spot of what that looks like. I have a digital marketing agency, and they have people that work from home 3 days and then 2 days in the office.
Mm-hmm. And one other AI comment, and then I do want to move to another topic. You know, you mentioned truck drivers as obviously having to go to work, but with self-driving semis that we're going to have probably in the next 5 years, there probably will be a period, if not indefinitely, where like with self-driving cars in San Francisco and some of these other test cities, where there are people that are sitting behind a monitor monitoring several vehicles, so that if there's a problem, they jump in and take over. So I could see down the road, especially with Tesla's self-driving semis, I think they're proposing to have a lead driver and then several autonomous semis following in a convoy. So maybe you've got some drivers that are not behind the wheel, but behind the computer and able to jump in and do something in need. So even truck drivers, if there are truck drivers in our future, they may even be able to work remotely too. So.
Yeah, no, that's a fascinating development. Yeah, it's kind of like a train on wheels, and it's yeah. I'd hate to be a truck driver. That seems like there's going to be a need for fewer drivers in the future. And of course, just like in the turn of the century, they had those switchboard operators where people were, you know, thousands of people doing that switchboard, and that got phased out. And so, you know, the only constant is change, and there are certain types of jobs that will be phased out, and it's really up to each person to adapt their skills and their knowledge to the new environment, and be able to leverage their talents in a different way, in a different form, to keep themselves relevant. So yeah, I think self-autonomous driving is just going to get more and more. I remember visiting my son in San Francisco about, I think it was maybe a year ago, and I saw these cars driving themselves, and it freaked me out. I'd never seen that before. And it wasn't just one, or it was just like a bunch of cars in SF, and it freaked me out. I'm not an early adopter. I'm not sure if I'm ready to just hop into a robo-taxi today, but maybe a year from now, 2 years, 5 years from now, it could be more and more the norm, and you'll see people getting into these things. And so,
well, Waymo and Cruise have really had to cut back their operations because there were some pretty bad mistakes where cars would block a roadway and keep emergency vehicles from being able to get to where they needed to go. And so they've really had to cut back theirs. I'm a huge Tesla fan, so their technology seems to be hands and above the others. But anyway, we digress.
Yeah,
So you
I'm
mentioned,
a fan of Tesla as well. So,
oh, good.
yeah.
And we're here 1 week after, or less than a week after, the release of the Cybertruck. So as we record this, so
yeah, that is one heck of a vehicle. I saw some clips of of Elon hand delivering these trucks, and it was a pretty funny flex of him towing this Porsche and beating the Porsche in this race. Not only
right.
did he beat the Porsche, but he also was towing the same Porsche behind him, which was really a comical flex. I just kind of chuckled when I saw that. That was pretty.
Yeah, I've got 6 Cybertrucks on order to put into the robo-taxi network when that comes about. But let's go back to you for a moment. In the introduction, which we pulled from some information that you provided, you talk about being able to consult or coach. I think it was business coaching in some areas. So in addition to focusing on hiring, sounds like you do some coaching. Talk a little more about that function within
Yeah,
your business.
80% of our work is really on the hiring side, helping them hire better people over time so that they have a winning team to help them profitably grow. In addition, some of our owners, if they have the bandwidth and the willingness and the ability to commit some time to engage in more of a coaching conversation, we have executive coaches that can work with them to help them better focus on the things that matter most, so that they can align their business with the things that matter, their purpose. So these are higher level conversations to make sure that whatever wall that you're climbing, when you get to the top of it, you enjoy the view. That's really the more strategic executive coaching conversation, is making sure that all the work that you're doing is leading you in the direction that ultimately you want to move towards. I don't know if there's a final destination, but at least there's a direction, and that's some part of what we offer. Very few of our clients take us up on it because they're just too consumed in the day-to-day working in the business versus stepping back and working on the business. But certainly we feel that is a huge area of opportunity. And I've personally used an executive coach the last couple of years that's helped me tremendously create that space of time for self-reflection. Is what I'm doing working? What am I doing that's not working as well? And thinking about it is important, and it's hard work. Peter Drucker is quoted as saying that thinking is hard work. That's why so few of us actually do it. It's kind of like having a personal trainer. You have to, sometimes if you have an accountability partner that can create some space in your calendar to think and to start asking the right questions, it'll improve your effectiveness by multiples of what you're doing now. So yeah, that is another service. And then as far as our fractional hiring HR, we basically, depending on the size of the company, charge a monthly. We don't have any long-term contracts, but it's a fixed monthly or based on the size of the company, and it usually ends up becoming like maybe the cost of a part-time employee compared to hiring somebody full-time. And we found that even helping our client hire one extra person that's a productive revenue generator for that company will more than pay for the cost of our services. So it's a pretty good ROI.
I know a lot of recruiters charge a percentage of the first year's income or salary of the person. So you don't charge that way for your recruiting services?
No, I mean, we have done one-offs where we will charge 15%, 12 to 15% of the annual salary, which is a lot less than your typical direct hire recruiting fee. But we found 90% of our clients will engage with us on an ongoing monthly kind of retainer, where basically for the cost of a part-time employee, or a single employee, depending on the size of the company, we'll provide all of the talent acquisition, any HR related functions. We have an HR business partner that we assign to each one of our clients that can answer any questions around employee compliance, handbook reviews, things like that, where you need a little higher level of concierge service for the client, and just serve as an extension of their team. I mean, our best positioning is when we're able to take a seat around the management table as an extension of their management team. We want to help the company achieve its most important goals, help them profitably grow by making sure they have the right fit employees who are aligned with their core products and services.
And interesting model there.
Yeah.
And I think it's distinctive in the field. Not that I'm an expert in the field, but I sense that's in the minority, and I could see how it could be valuable to a company and valuable to you, because you're in a better position to hear about new needs for new employees and be closer to the action rather than being on the outside and having to be called in each time.
Yeah, we hate working as a vendor where they throw out a job title and say, just find us some candidates. We kind of shy away from those types of engagements. We want to have a more holistic approach. So when we work with the client, we'll get a payroll census of the pay for all of their employees. So we have kind of a landscape of an ecosystem of their pay, so that we understand what's appropriate given their current pay ranges. We want to have an org chart, figure out what are the key functional boxes that comprise their organizational structure. And then maybe we need to start developing additional boxes that are required for the growth and sustainability of the company. So we want to take a holistic approach to the talent acquisition process, and not just serve as kind of like a mercenary where we're just out to find a particular role for them.
Mm-hmm.
Just typically the domain of recruiters. And frankly, for some of the lower level positions, I mean, small business owners are not paying 20% of a $50,000 a year salary person making $25 an hour. They're not writing a check for 10 grand, for that. Now, if they need a special design engineer that they can't find that's making 120, 140, some of these firms will pay 20% of that.
Sure. Do you have any other general advice, truisms, things that you've learned through your work that you would pass along to the business owners in our audience? Just general lessons learned that you've learned that you would pass along, that we have, things that we haven't talked about.
Yeah, I would say, when you're looking for employees, I mean, what is the overall purpose of your business? why are you doing the business? And I know it's like, well, I need to, make a living, provide a lifestyle and quality of life for my family. But I think, getting in touch with your purpose. Are you aligning your business with your purpose? And purpose is a big word. You can kind of break that down into the mission and vision, and really finding folks that are aligned with that purpose, aligning yourself with your purpose, your business, which consists of the people in your business, because that's the most important part, right? Your business is only as good as the people that make up your business. So, getting in touch with your overall your bigger picture purpose, and then making sure you find people that are best aligned with that, I think would be another dimension of thinking about things beyond just the tasks and the duties and the must-haves versus the nice-to-have traits and competencies that are specific for that role. It's just another dimension and a way of thinking about.
Sure. So be sure you're aligned as a business owner with the values that you espouse, and then that will help to make it more likely that you'll be able to find people who are aligned because you're walking the walk.
Yeah, I think that's the key. More likely. I mean, if you're more in touch and more aware of of why you're doing what you're doing in terms of your purpose, for why the business exists, and aligning your business with your purpose, and then focusing on the things that matter most to driving that purpose forward, will help inform the type of people you need to make that happen. On and beyond, just the functional skills and traits, I think it's kind of speaks to that idea of culture.
Mm-hmm. Well, this has been really valuable for me, and I hope and trust for the audience as well. If people would like to reach out to you, first of all, where are you located? And geographically, not that it matters in this day and age, as we've discussed, but give your website, even though part of it's behind you, and best ways for people to reach out to you, to engage you, or if they have questions.
Yeah, I'm in Southern California. I live in a city called Upland, which is about 40 minutes east of Los Angeles, downtown LA. Our recruiters are spread out all over the country. Of course, it doesn't matter. We have one in Texas, Pennsylvania, Colorado. So it doesn't matter where our clients reside, as long as we can, source their resumes on Indeed, LinkedIn, or Zip. We're good to go. Best way to reach me is they can reach me on my email, steve@mytalentscope.com. And that's also our website, mytalentscope.com, steve@mytalentscope.com. And just shoot me an email. I'd be happy to speak to anyone who'd like to have just an exploratory conversation of how we can help them hire better and help them surround themselves with a winning team.
Great. Well, thanks for this conversation. And, I think just as we had major changes with COVID in the employment setting, we're poised to have some major changes with AI coming on really strong this year. And maybe let's plan to have a follow-up discussion. Maybe we'll wait a few months and see how this AI era starts to play out. And I think it's going to have a major impact on employment. And we can talk about some of those changes then.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Yeah, you definitely brought something to the surface in terms of, using AI to analyze resumes. I never thought of actually doing that, but I might give it a whirl. I might say, hey, analyze this resume based on this job title and tell me if you think it's a fit or not, or why, and see what they come up with. And because certainly, AI is being used to craft letters, emails, various content. I've used it myself. Hey, take a look at this, see if there's any edit recommendations for clarity and succinctness. And so, and it gives me some nice suggestions, sometimes not so great, but that's where you kind of have to pick through the recommendations and keep the ones that are good and relevant versus the ones that
Right.
aren't.
Well, so Steve, thanks so much for joining me today, talking about HR and hiring. To learn more about Steve and Talentscope, be sure to check his information down in the show notes. The resources that he gave you we'll have down below. You can also learn more about OutMarket.Pro and our small business solutions, including AI services, down in the show notes. So if you enjoyed the episode, please like it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and don't forget that notification bell, because that notifies you when there are new episodes that are published. And we're usually uploading a new podcast about every week. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the OutMarket.Pro podcast. And thanks again, Steve.
Thank you, Mark, for such an engaging conversation. You did such a great job with interviewing and asking some great questions. So thank you again for that opportunity.
Well, thank you.
In your podcast.
Thank you.